And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. According to the BC government website, when BC seniors have health conditions and care needs that can no longer be safely managed in their own home, they have access to assisted living residences and residential care facilities that provide a range of services from personal care to 24-hour professional care and supervision. We begin today's Open Connection as MLA Ellis responds to a recent senior awareness walk in Smithers.
The senior citizens there are talking about senior services that should be delivered in Smithers, but specifically affordable housing for seniors. And the interesting thing was, at the end of the day, they asked the question, how do we ensure the government takes us seriously? And my answer was, hold your politicians accountable. Because there's a difference between making an announcement, especially in election year, versus the reality of whether or not it's in a budget, on budget day in the BC legislature. And this is one of the reasons why I never really applauded anybody when they were announcing Mills Memorial Hospital replacement. Because it was just an announcement. It was actually just a promise from a politician. Where you really look for it is when you open up the budget on budget day and look at it as a line item. And when Mills Memorial Hospital was listed as a line item finally, then I was satisfied that yes, Mills Memorial Hospital would be built. But that's the difference. I mean, there's going to be a lot of announcements this year in BC leading up to October election. But that's for politics. So my answer to them was, hold your politicians accountable. The other side of this is that to understand the process, an MLA or a minister can promise, but that's not actually what would be delivered, because there's more work to be done by that MLA or minister. Because after you make the promise, you got to convince your party that this is a worthy goal that needs to be a government deliverable. And once you convince your party, then you got to convince government. And then government then actually decides on it, and then it goes to Treasury Board. Then Treasury Board approves it. So it's not a simple thing of just promising something. There's a whole elaborate process that everybody's got to go through, whether you're an MLA or a minister. And it's about lobbying and trying to get something done as a representative for your riding. So it's make all the promises you want. And it doesn't matter if you're a minister or not, because there's going to be 93 ridings across BC, and they all want something similar to what Smithers is asking for. So government supposedly is going to try to keep it equitable and fair for 93 ridings across BC. And of course, we know what we think about government in rural areas. We're an afterthought. So you got to fight extra hard to bring services into our rural ridings. With no economy in Kitimat back in the 80s and 90s, the way I grew up as a young man, we needed something to sustain our community. And it didn't matter if I was a councillor or a chief councillor or an MLA. I always felt that we need representatives that focus on our ridings, regardless of your position, regardless of your politics. Quite thankfully, we got our LNG projects moving ahead. Could have had more, but no, we didn't get there. But it was enough for me to understand that it wouldn't matter if I'm running federally, provincially, running locally. It didn't matter. I'm from the region. All my friends and family are here. I want the region to succeed.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. A Government of Canada provincial and territorial energy profile found that the potential resources contained within BC and Alberta were 449 trillion cubic feet of marketable natural gas, 14,521 million barrels of marketable natural gas liquids, and 1,125 million barrels of oil. Let us return the conversation with MLA Ross.
We got to start recognizing how much value natural gas and natural gas byproducts bring to BC. And it's the best kept secret. I just got back from Prince Rupert. the AltaGas announcement in terms of their propane expansion. They're going to double the amount of propane being shipped by rail from northeastern BC to Prince Rupert. So all those black rail cars you see are full of propane. They're going to double the amount. And now that the announcement I went to was saying that, yes, they've made their final investment decision. They're going to actually start expanding the Rupert terminal. Now, this is in parallel to the amount of coal that's already being shipped through Prince Rupert. And if you add on to that, there's a proposal through Trigon to start shipping ammonia by rail from Alberta to Prince Rupert. And the only thing holding that back is the idea that Canada will not indemnify the rail cars the same way that Canada indemnifies rail cars for oil and gas. But it's happening right next door to us. And well, what happens in Prince Rupert is going to make the region stronger. Kitimat has got it on a different level. They got a major project in LNG Canada. They're going to have Haisla Cedar, much smaller scale of LNG exports. But we're just touching the surface of what's possible. I mean, the world is moving to hydrogen extracted from natural gas. They're moving to ammonia, which is actually also a carrier of hydrogen. But there's so many different things happening with natural gas and the byproducts right now. And BC is very slow to understand this. I've been following and trying to help out McLeod Lake, for example, build a straddle plant for hydrogen ammonia. And they've got a long-term plan. But in bits and pieces, everywhere I go across BC, including Woodfibre, I'll be going to visit Woodfibre next. They're going to actually start drilling under the estuary in Squamish to get their pipeline over to their site, similar to how they drilled under the Kitimat River to get the pipeline for LNG Canada from Kitimat district site to their plant site. So there's things happening, not on the scale that was proposed 10 years ago, but on a smaller level. I'm also going to go visit the Tilbury terminal in Delta. They need federal approval now as the last steps to get their terminal approved. And what they're doing is they're going to build a terminal that will actually fuel up ships that are powered by natural gas. And there's a lot of stuff happening. And I think the public should be aware that even though these politicians are saying that they're actually getting rid of fossil fuels, in fact, they're not. It's actually being promoted and it's actually built, but in pockets around BC, and very quietly. So Woodfibre should be celebrated. Haisla Cedar should be celebrated. What's happening with McLeod Lake should be celebrated because we're becoming part of the global fabric. The next one I've been trying to fight for the extension for the pipeline certificate for the Niska pipeline. And it sounds to me like they would not get the extension for the certificate. So now Niska is proposing to do basically what's called substantial work completed on the pipeline, meaning if they can prove there's a certain amount of work that they've completed, then the government will have to decide that, yes, you've done this amount of work, your certificate is safe, we can't take that certificate away from you. They've got like a year window. So Niska is under pressure to actually start work on the pipeline. So the announcements you see and the work you see on the pipeline is mainly to promote the Niska's LISM's LNG project. But it's another huge project that BC will benefit from. But really, if you look at what Trigon's proposing, Japan is going after all the ammonia and hydrogen they can get their hands on. So you take the hydrogen out of natural gas and you mix it with nitrogen out of the air and you make ammonia. And there's so much of this that even us as politicians, we don't understand. But we're really talking about the periodic table in terms of hydrogen, in terms of helium, in terms of all those elements on a periodic table. There's so much of it we don't understand. And right now I feel that we're playing catch up to the rest of the world. The rest of the world has already got these petrochemical plants and they're refining their products and they're coming up with more innovations. And BC, we're just getting started. We're still at the proposal stage. We're still trying to go with the idea of electric cars. when we know for a fact we don't have enough supply of electricity, we don't have the infrastructure, and at the same time we're actually shutting down the domestic use of natural gas for regions of BC that really need it. The energy policy domestically for BC doesn't seem to make any sense when energy is the bottom line. But the rest of the world is asking for Canadian natural gas, not just for the product alone, but actually for the byproducts. So I do think we need to do a deeper dive into petrochemical plants for a domestic fuel policy, as well as international. All right, we send it out a raw product, they manufacture it, then we buy the product back from them. When I hear this all the time when politicians say we should be actually doing more for manufacturing instead of sending out raw logs. That's great, let's do it. But let's do it for oil and gas as well. I mean, even John Horgan, when the Coquihalla washed out, the lower mainland went into a fuel crisis. There's no gas and diesel. So they started shipping in oil and gas from Washington State by barge into Vancouver. They limited the people down in Vancouver to 30 liters of fill-up. That was a fuel crisis. And even John Horgan said that, yeah, it'd be much better if we could process more gas and diesel products in BC, mainly to become independent. So another washout happens and we get that oil and gas infrastructure shut down. We're not in so much trouble anymore. See, we're so dependent on Washington State, so dependent on Alberta for our gas and diesel, that if anything happens that turns those taps off, we're in real trouble. And especially places like Vancouver Island. If for some reason the oil and gas supply stopped going to Vancouver Island, they have enough supply for 3 days for the entire island. And 3 days is not a lot, especially when you think about the prioritization, right? So 3 days, ambulances, they're going to get it first. Police, they're going to get that product first. All the critical services, they will get service first. And after that, citizens. And I've been in Victoria for 6 years, 7 years. The amount of vehicles in Victoria is insane. The traffic. I mean, I sit in traffic lines going from Victoria to Nanaimo, and I just can't believe, how can the BC government realistically say that everybody's going to own an electric car by 2035, given the amount of vehicles owned in Victoria and Vancouver alone? That's a massive amount of vehicles. And if there's 5 million people in BC, and maybe, let's say, half of them own a car, that's 2.5 million cars. And you don't have the infrastructure to support all these electric cars. So it sounds great that you're going to shut down the oil and gas industry, but realistically, there's no real plan apart from making sure that the cost of living goes up and life gets harder for British Columbians.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. The Montney Formation is a major shale gas and tight oil resource found in BC and Alberta. It makes it one of the largest known gas resources in the world and equivalent to 145 years of Canada's 2012 consumption. Let us return the conversation as MLA Ross shares how this resource can be used to boost BC's economy.
Number one, you need knowledge, facts. This is happening all over around the world, and we're still at proposal stage. And we've built up such a hysteria and anti-oil, anti-gas narrative in Canada, even though our quality of life depends on it. The affordability, that's linked to oil and gas, that's linked to energy. So have a mature discussion about what energy is all about, number one. And once you can understand and our role in a global context in terms of what we can provide to the rest of the world, then you can have that conversation. I mean, look, Germany came to Canada looking for natural gas, they got sent away. Italy came looking for natural gas, they got sent away. Greece came to Canada, got sent away. We got tons of natural gas, And whether or not you're talking about taking out the byproduct and turning it into a value-added product or sending out as a raw export, you can't deny the fact that there is a business case for natural gas because it's supply and demand. People from all over the world are coming to BC and saying, hey, we have a demand for natural gas and energy. Can you help us? BC, we've got a huge supply of natural gas. Canada, you have a huge supply of natural gas. And we say, no, we can't help you. That's nonsense. I mean, there's so much we got to learn, but we also have, first, we have to have a factual, mature conversation about energy. Well, what's really got to change is that we need a reality check in terms of what's happening in BC. No matter what you read in the papers, oil and gas is still alive and well in BC. TMX pipeline went over budget, but the taxpayer owns that through the federal government right now. It's going to happen. Tanker traffic is going to increase in the Lower Mainland. It's going to increase with the twinning of the pipeline. Natural gas, in terms of wood fiber is going to get built. We just saw the announcement there, they're going to start drilling. Cedar LNG is going to get built. LNG Canada is basically completed. Phase 1 at least. Phase 2, questionable whether or not they'll get approved for that. And I think it's all based on electricity infrastructure and supply. But that's going to get built. So the idea that somehow, with all these politicians promising they're going to shut it down, but quietly approving all these projects, yeah, you've got to understand the reality in terms of what's really happening. The announcement just in Rupert, propane is a byproduct of natural gas. They're going to double the amount of propane shipped from out of Rupert. It's going to come in by rail. So everybody's talking about these new provisions to shut down oil and gas and all these laws, by the way, not to talk about it. I mean, all these member bills coming through Ottawa saying that they call it greenwashing. Well, there was a private member's bill that went there that said, well, if you greenwash oil and gas projects, you can get sent to jail or you can get fined or both. I mean, nobody's talking about just a simple premise of saying, well, what about the freedom of speech? What about freedom of expression? And this basically, from my understanding, included First Nations advocating for oil and gas. Well, it was Haisla that brought the natural gas export idea to BC. So you're saying now that if we promote this as an alternative to coal in Asia, that even natives can get thrown in jail or fined? This is, and it all goes back to the idea of saying the quality of life in Canada can be traced back to affordable energy, dependable energy. Now, if you don't want affordable energy and you don't want dependable energy, great, tell your politician that. But the cost of living is going to go up. Dependability is going to get reduced. I mean, we've seen countries all around the world where they've made political decisions in terms of energy, and now they're facing rolling blackouts. Germany built a terminal to accept natural gas. They built terminals within 2 years because of the war in Ukraine, in terms of Russia supplying natural gas to the rest of Europe. So Germany put all its eggs into one basket in terms of clean energy. Then they found out, hey, we can't turn our back on coal, we can't turn our back on natural gas, and now they're scrambling. And the cost of living for the German people went up. And just the idea that in a crisis, they built a terminal within 2 years. Here in BC, it took us 20 years to build one facility. And we're not even complete. We're not even completed yet. So when people ask me this question, I just say, you know what, you got to understand what energy means in terms of your life, affordability, dependability. Because I think here in BC, we take it for granted. Energy.
And you think that needs to come from top down?
Top down. Yeah. When these politicians are demonizing energy like this, and not actually telling the real facts behind it, in terms of how it affects people, it's doing a disservice to the members, the citizens of British Columbia. Long before I became an MLA, everybody knew my stance on natural gas. And they still want me to run. They elected me. And I've never changed my opinion. I've never changed what I said about natural gas and energy. So when these parties come after me to run federally, and all these different groups actually start to support me, it's in full knowledge that I support energy in all forms, mainly because I know how it affects our quality of life, how it affects affordability. So I can only say that if you do want me to represent you, I can't change what I think about when I think about energy or resource development or economic development. I can't change that just for the sake of politics.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
The Ministry of Forests is responsible for supporting a sustainable and competitive future for BC's forest sector, while taking action to keep forests healthy and protect communities in the face of climate change and extreme weather events. In this final segment of Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1994.
The process of reviewing the Calam North timber supply began in 1991, but this report represents the final phase before BC's chief forester sets an annual allowable cut for the area. The discussion paper adds detail to an earlier report forecasting substantial cuts in harvest rates for the area.
The base case indicates current harvest level can be maintained for 30 years and has to decline 10% per decade until 120 years from now to the long-term level of 410,000 cubic meters per year.
That's about 1/3 today's harvest level. Over the next 3 months, you're being asked to comment on the review, and those comments will be submitted to the chief forester.
The discussion paper is a readable document. It's fairly thin, and in the back section there's a number of questions to help get people to submit comments, and these questions aren't restricting people's comments. Anything that wants to be submitted will be accepted. At the end of the public input period, which is October 20th of this year, we'll summarize the comments and submit it to the Minister of Forests and the Chief Forester before the AEC determination is made.
Included in this report is an appendix authored by the Nisga'a Tribal Council, which finds itself at odds with some of the paper's conclusions.
Basically, what they're trying to say is that we've overestimated the timber supply, the timber harvesting land base, and not adequately addressed some social and economic factors that could have been addressed in the social economic assessment report.
So even though some people are worried about you making too many cuts, too major cuts, the Nisga'a aren't sure that you've gone far enough. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's the bottom line from their point of view.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.